Welcome to the Sensitive Shift podcast. We're your hosts, Agathe and Anna, and like most of us, we build and maintain relationships with others with the added flavor of being highly sensitive.
Quick recap of last episode. So in our last episode, we explored the connections between high sensitivity and mental health. We defined and differentiated mental health and mental illness. We addressed the question of whether being highly sensitive increases our risk of suffering from poor mental health, mental illness, or both. And we covered our top tips to nourish, cultivate, and care for our mental health as HSPs. You'll remember from earlier episodes that being highly sensitive is not a diagnosis, but rather a personality trait that offers both benefits and challenges. As Elaine Aron puts it, while those in poor environments, especially in childhood, are more subject than others to problems, those in supportive, enriched environments function better than others in various ways. This is called differential susceptibility.
In today's episode, we will be navigating the complex world of building, fostering, and maintaining relationships as HSPs. All of our previous episodes, tackling topics ranging from attachment to communication through gender norms and self-awareness, lead up beautifully to today's conversation on the topic many HSPs might actually find quite challenging. So we're eager to dive deep with care and gentleness. I thought we would start with a passage, Anna, that I found in the book Sensitive by Jenn, Granneman, and Sólo, which I have been referencing quite a bit in this podcast because it's great and I'm reading it right now, still reading it. And it's really about HSPs and relationships. The focus is a bit on romantic relationships, but it applies to all relationships, actually, whether they're friendships, family relationships, or romantic relationships.
Ready.
Okay. So they say, as we've seen, sensitive people tend to be conscientious and have high levels of empathy. So you might think that strong, healthy relationships come naturally to them, whether it's friendship or love. Yet all too often, sensitive people say otherwise. Relationships are one of their greatest challenges in life. Here are some of the things that sensitive people report as being challenging in their marriage or relationships and friendships. Needing more downtime than your partner or friends need to recover from stimulation. Getting easily overwhelmed by argument, raised voices, or other expressions of disappointment or anger, like a slammed door, and needing more time than others need to recover from conflict with loved ones. Putting your spouse's, children's, or friends' needs ahead of your own to the point of exhaustion, burnout, or disconnection from yourself. Reading others so well that they cannot hide their emotions from you, and in turn taking those emotions personally. Getting taken over by bigger, louder, and more aggressive personalities and consequently feeling resentment, hurt, or taken advantage of. Being targeted by narcissists or other toxic or controlling people. Deeply feeling the impact of other people's words, especially criticism and blame. Getting easily worn down by drama, gossip, or small talk. Feeling misunderstood by others because you experience the world differently as a result of your sensitivity. Craving a deeper mental, emotional, and sexual connection than many people are able to give. And finding your people, those who understand you and who not only respect but also cherish your sensitivity. I think last week when we were prepping this episode and I was reading this passage to you the first time, I had tears in my eyes because it's a passage that holds a lot of emotion.
Definitely. And even the way that it was introduced, right? We would think that relationships would come so easily.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an inkling why people would think that relationship would come so easily for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that empathy would allow us to understand and feel what other people are feeling, meaning that connection might come easier.
It's like an altruistic quality. Yeah. Is there one of those challenges that we spoke about that you feel like really spoke to you?
The point that you mentioned about reading others so well that they're not able to hide their
Mhm.
emotions from you.
Mm.
I'm the kind of person that when someone isn't feeling well, I know, and they don't always want me to know.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
they might be
Oh
trying to be
my.
like everything's fine. Like they might not even want themselves to know, if that makes sense. Like they're feeling uncomfortable or distressed and they want to be able to move on, and I'm like, but I see it.
Yeah.
So I feel this. Do we need to talk about it?
That rings very true right now for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a little story, if we can permit a little story
Yeah,
here,
go ahead.
which is I recently in February I went on a trip with my family, with my twin sister. And it's so funny because I feel like there was one day that I remember in particular where there was just tension building. I don't even remember exactly for what. And then after dinner, we were all playing a game. We were playing Catan.
Oh no.
You know where this is going. And I just feel like this is one of those games where, like, if you have any inner beef, it's going to come out. And so I think there was one moment where I was asking for a resource and I knew she had the resource because she had just picked up the resource. And I think she had like a monopoly of this resource. And I was like, "Do you have it?" Yes. And I was like, "Well, can I give you anything for it?" Because I had every single other resource. And she was like, "No."
She's like, I'm not
I
I'm
was
not
like,
doing
"Okay,
business
you're
with you.
definitely mad." Like anyways, after that game, like we went back, we were going to sleep, I think, and we went back to the bedroom and she was like, "Okay, I think we need to talk about it." And I was like, "Yeah, I think we need to talk about it." And it was finally the moment to resolve. And just to say that to the point of reading others so well is it all culminated in this game, but we both knew it was just right below the surface. And I think I avoid conflict
Mm,
except if I feel really safe being able to express myself and potentially resolve conflict.
mm,
And so there's an there's an aspect of the safety and the quality of the relationship that actually makes a difference.
mm,
And my takeaway is really that conflict resolution, when we can do it and the relationship is one that we really value, can actually in the end strengthen the relationship. So when we feel like it's possible to address conflict, we can actually be a lot closer to the person.
mhm,
And I love that, like, I think I can do this with my sister, who's one of the most important people in the world for me and one of the closest
mhm,
relationships that I have. And part of what makes it that way is, one, the attunement. So being able to tell as soon as something little is off, and then being able to address it.
mhm. Yeah. And I'm also wondering if, because you said it's a safety of knowing that you can express yourself, but I'm wondering if it's also the safety in knowing it's safety in the relationship itself. So it's safety in the
Mm,
result of what's going to happen once you express yourself. So knowing that the person is not going
yeah.
to leave or is not going to, there's not going to be any punishment for you for expressing yourself. So it's both having the confidence in expressing, which does require
Yeah.
some strength and some self-awareness and and
Mm.
eloquence, that ability to put words on a feeling or feelings, and then also the confidence in the result, which is outside of our control. As long as it's inside, we still have control over what's going to come out, right? And
Mm.
often that's where the why we were so hesitant in saying something, and we keep it. We might know something's wrong, we might not know yet something's wrong, and then sometimes that fear is about the repercussions, right? So
100%, right? So the only reason why I would avoid conflict is out of fear that it might not go well
mm-hmm.
and that I might lose the person.
Mm,
So it absolutely has to do both with my ability to express and also my confidence in how we will be able to come out the other side stronger
mm-hmm. Yeah, look at this Catan bringing people together
in the
and
end.
not
It's like the uncomfortable middle. The catalyst.
yeah, exactly.
Catalyst. What about you, Agathe? Any of those stand out for you?
Yeah, I think like you, all of them, or many of them at least, resonate in some aspect. It's funny
Mm.
because reading some of them last week resonated more last week, and then this week some of them resonate more this week. And
Oh.
I think like a one that's kind of a uh, constant theme would be the one of feeling misunderstood. That's been one of the greatest challenges, I would say, in my life, or over the years that I've actively worked on or had to work on, and to have to remind myself that there's going to be people who will understand. There's a majority of people who won't understand. Or when I say won't understand, they might not understand the breadth, and that's normal and that's okay. And it doesn't take anything away from my experience, from my value, and from my worth. And that's the point, the breaking point,
Mm.
right? Because for a very long time I felt like I had to over and over and over explain everything, every decision, every thought, every feeling, in the hope that people would understand everything that was going on for me at the same time. That's just not possible. There's just, it's everything, there's too much, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I thought that if people didn't get it, then it meant that something was wrong with me. And then I learned slowly to let go, that one, I don't have to explain myself all the time.
Right.
It's exhausting. And then I think I also found ways to differentiate between the people and the spaces or the environments that I care about expressing and explaining parts or um, threads of myself. It won't be the full picture. It's not possible. It's too much, and that's the case for everyone, since it's highly sensitive or not. And then there are spaces where I understand that maybe that won't be the case, especially as a highly sensitive person. I feel like my sensitivity won't be cherished or valued or understood or taken care of. And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't present or lead with the sensitivity portion. And as long as I know what these spaces are, then my what's important to me is about having that balance, right? Is knowing that I have the spaces where I have that. So, for example, being able to see some very close friends or close loved ones, and knowing that I can show up to your place and be like, I'm feeling very overwhelmed by some, like, the sirens that just rang as I walked in or crossed the street, because I was already thinking about something that was very stressful for me. And then I can show up in your space and talk about that or any other situation. And I know that you'll understand what that feels like from a stimulation
Mhm.
perspective, whereas it's much harder to come into other spaces and lead with the same stories.
It sounds like the most important thing is just knowing how you can show up in different places and still preserve your authenticity in all of those
Yes.
spaces, but you might lead differently.
But even that definition of authenticity, I thought as well, I evolved with that because I thought that it meant I had to be the same everywhere.
Mm,
But that's also
yeah.
not true. I don't have to present and lead with the same parts of my sensitivity at work than I do in private practice, that I do in my romantic partnership, than I do in my friendships, than I do in my family. That doesn't mean I'm not authentic or that I'm not true to myself or my sensitivity. They're just about the different roles that we play and
Yeah.
that they require different parts of us at different times.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Sensitivity and relationships can, in fact, feel quite vast and overwhelming. So I'm wondering, Anna, if you've ever experienced this phenomenon of suppressing your sensitivity, actually, maybe as a way to fit in or to accommodate other people around you.
It's still a work in progress. So I'm going to say I do and have felt at times that I wanted to maybe not suppress my sensitivity because it's been there and it is there, but maybe suppress my expression of it.
Mm,
Does that make sense?
nuance. Yeah.
So, yeah. So, meaning that I might try to not say that I have needs or I'm not
Mm.
expressing my preferences in all situations. And that part doesn't feel as good. So that's a part that's a work in progress. So I'm just going to make this a bit more concrete with a story, I think, but an example of where I would practice distress tolerance.
We're back.
An example of China's, suppress my or like be okay with not having my preferences be prioritized. For example, that I don't particularly love going out clubbing, nightclubs, super loud music where you can't hear the person beside you kind of situation. But this happens to be an environment that a lot of people do love and is very popular. And because I have friends that I love and value, and not everybody has the same preferences as me, they tend to be invited to parties and celebrations and gatherings in places like these, which wouldn't be where I would choose,
Mhm.
but they happen to contain people that I love. And so I want to go and I honor the parts of me that want to go. And I try and balance that with I'm going to go for a couple of hours and I might not stay the entire time,
Yeah.
for example. And I think this comes back to distress tolerance. And to me, it's not suppressing my sensitivity to do that. It's honoring the different parts of me. So it's honoring the need that I have to connect and be there with my friends and celebrate with them. And then also the part of me that honors the sensitivity is the part that says, I'm going to stay for a few hours. You continue, you keep dancing. I'm going to go at 1 a.m. So it's a nice kind of balance between those.
I love that you frame it that way because it's true. It's about honoring different parts of yourself that can coexist, right? It's not only about the hardships or the challenges. There's also other parts of you that are like, well, I do appreciate that about going to this place, and it could be around it's my friend's party. They really like this. I like to dance. Those could be what motivates you to go and to put a limit, a boundary, which we will talk about in a bit. This can help. This can be a good way to manage the situation. But if we think about that moment or spaces where you've had to maybe dim or quiet down some needs, what could we do as HSPs when we feel like that's happening?
Like, it's been a journey in reframing. And I've
Mhm.
definitely had moments where I felt, no, like I actually have to suppress my needs. I can't express it here. And that's usually led to resentment, which is not so
Mm.
great. So it's been a journey of reframing. And I think what's helped along that journey that I'm still on, but what's helped is being aware. So building awareness, mindfulness without judgment.
Mhm.
Oh, that's hard, eh?
Mm.
And then it's been, oh my gosh, we've talked about journaling every single podcast.
For a reason.
There's a reason we keep coming back to it. So a lot of the time, it hasn't been in the moment that I've been able to do this. It's been afterwards when I'm not feeling so well that I'm sort of like, why am I not feeling so well? It's because I tried to have less needs.
Mm.
And really, for me, that's been about reflecting and being more mindful of what's been going on for me in those moments where I've tried to suppress the needs that I've had that are related to sensitivity. So that's been about reflecting a lot of the time on what I'm afraid of.
Mm.
It's been about fear. And what are the fears that might have been behind either the urge, or a lot of the time it was the action about suppressing needs around sensitivity?
Mhm.
Has it been a fear that if I said something, I would be rejected or shut down? Is it a fear that there's something wrong with me, so I just don't even want to have this?
Mhm.
A fear of being inadequate or being perceived as inadequate or different. It's usually been in my mind about fears of showing up the way that I am.
Mm.
And I'm just going to come back to the reframing because I love that. It's really been about finding this balance, because expressing my needs that are related to sensitivity doesn't mean that I have to lean into them 100%, if that makes sense. So if we come back to the party example, I don't want to be and I don't need to be someone who says, you know what, I don't like loud places, I'm not going to go.
Mhm.
It's not what I want. But we could take it to that extreme, just like I have taken it to the extreme of saying, I don't want to be the only one who likes quieter things. So I'm going to do exactly what everyone's going to do. I don't have to be in either extreme. In fact, I don't really want to be in either extreme. It's been about reframing and finding where can I do my balance? Where can I have the most needs met? So the needs for connection
Mm.
and belonging and building distress tolerance.
Mhm.
Where can all of that meet?
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Because some of these needs sometimes are in conflict with each other, right? If you
Yeah.
want to be in a quiet environment, but right now you also have a need for connection and for belonging, and the event that's presented to you is in a
Mm-hmm.
loud restaurant, then what's the compromise here so that your needs are being met while also knowing that they are in conflict with one another in that precise moment. So I like that. I like to show that it is complex and it's not a straightforward answer. I also like what you said about reflecting and taking the time to reflect, and yes, using journaling for that. And something that's bringing up for me is the skill of differentiating as a
Mm.
skill to practice. And Sometimes feeling overwhelmed can also be a combination with feeling activated if there's a mixed trauma response, for example, which can be very common with people who are highly sensitive who also have experience with mental health or mental illness. And so it can be helpful to use our logical brain when we have a strong emotional reaction to help us do some exercises and answer some of these questions around what about this situation is overwhelming or distressing? What does it remind me of, to connect back to that trigger? And then the differentiation portion is around this is different than when blank happened because blank. And that's where you are able to connect back to the present while still acknowledging that there's a reason why we feel activated or overwhelmed in the present. And so there's validation while also being able to come back to the present. And then knowing a few strategies to self regulate in the moment, such as taking a break. And that can also look like just going to the bathroom if you're not alone, if you're with a group of friends, going to a club, if you are in the restaurant, if you are at somebody's house, and letting your friend or partner know that you need a minute, a soothing activity for one of your senses, like lighting a candle or looking at something that's pleasing for your eyes, or petting a dog can be one of these soothing activities. And then I think there's also something to be said about feeling authentic and thus safe enough for all the parts of ourselves to be not only present in this space, but welcomed and cherished and appreciated and valued. Because being sensitive shouldn't be something we feel is a burden that we need to live with and others have to help us carry it, but just rather another part of us that has needs, and needs and difference and uniqueness are all valid and wanted.
Yeah, I love what you said about it shouldn't be something that we feel is a burden. It's
Mm-hmm.
a difference that comes with its gifts and also with its challenges. Speaking of gifts and challenges, when we were preparing for this episode, one of the things that we had spoken about was the trait of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And empathy has both been framed as a strength and also as a curse, quote unquote,
Yeah.
by other researchers and people who speak in the field, especially when it comes to relationships with others. So, I got what has been your relationship with empathy as that relates to boundary setting as an HSP, since it can be challenging to set boundaries given high empathy and agreeableness in HSPs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a bit about my experience with boundary setting because it's been quite the
Mm-hmm.
journey. In my early adult years, because I think this is where it was the most significant, when you start living your life on your own, the structure is more self-imposed. I had a really hard time setting boundaries with friends and in romantic relationships. I wanted to accommodate everyone and others before I would do anything for myself. So I would bend over backwards to make sure that things worked out. And so now that could range between arranging coffee dates, phone chats, all the way to accepting very problematic behavior. So, not great. I wasn't doing very great with boundary setting. And my thoughts at the time were that it was normal. It was normal for me to do everything I possibly could to make things work no matter what the situation was. You can't meet at 3 p.m., but you can meet at 12. I have an assignment due in 3 hours. no problem. I'll find a way to make it work so I can meet you at 12. That's fine. But then what would end up happening was that I would experience major resentment and anger when then others would cancel plans or wouldn't listen when I expressed a need in return. And it felt very, these responses felt very disproportionate in some instances to the situation. So, like a coffee date cancellation, then I would get extremely upset. I would feel disrespected. I would feel very angry, very resentful towards that person when, it's a coffee date. Like, sure, not cool, but it's not the end of the world. And I really felt it that way. And that's where, over time and within that range, because it wasn't just over coffee date that I felt this way,
Mm.
I learned that it was a disservice to me and others when I keep pushing my limits and go beyond what I'm actually okay with. So I had to start with lower stakes activity like coffee dates and phone chats. Um, and I started only offering times where I was truly available and didn't have to rearrange my schedule and jump through hoops to make something work. It was very hard. I'm not going to lie. It was very hard in the beginning. And over time, I saw that when I didn't get a positive response, such as, well, that doesn't work for me either. Sure, let's find another time next week. I didn't lose these friends. No one made me feel bad for not being able to meet their schedule at all times. And so, over a few trial and error and experimenting, I understood that, oh, well, everybody is able to have their needs met, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It took some times, and then, I went with higher stakes issues and standing up for problematic behavior and things like that. And yeah, sometimes it really hurt and I felt punished for stepping up for myself, but it's I felt more I felt less dissonance within myself for saying something that was actually how I felt, or how I what I actually needed, and sticking by it. I felt more, more aligned inside, and so I felt like I was less. My own mood was less dependent on other people's movement and other people's decisions for me. And so then my feelings changed a lot. I wasn't as angry or didn't feel as disrespected anymore. Yeah, I could feel disappointed. That's normal feeling to have if somebody bails on you, but I didn't have those like very strong disproportionate reaction.
Mm. I'm so proud of you for developing,
Thank you.
yeah, those skills. And, what I'm hearing too is that sensitivity, empathy, agreeableness, these are all traits. They're part of us. Setting boundaries
Yes,
is a skill, it's learned.
absolutely.
And it sounds like these can be and are so complementary, and that when we have all of these traits and then we add the layer of boundary setting and the skill, that in the end, this has led to stronger and better relationships because of how you can show up, and some of the negative emotions like resentment that you were able to let go of through the skills that you developed.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the empathy part was what was at times keeping me stuck,
Mm.
but then I turned that more inwards and understood that I also needed to take care of myself. Otherwise, it was very hard to take care of others. And that was an extremely important skill to understand and practice before I became a clinician.
Mm-hmm. This reminds me of this quote that says, boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. So, our
Mm.
empathy for others, our compassion and care for others needs to be equally directed inwards, not more, also not
Mm.
less. And in that
I love
space, we
that.
can maintain healthy and meaningful relationships. So, with that said, how can we practice setting boundaries and balance that empathy and compassion at the same time? Can we have some practical insights? How can we all get on the boundary skill building train?
Yeah. Well, maybe let's talk about why it is so hard
Yeah.
to set some boundaries, um, just a little bit before, but some of that fear around boundary setting can often be linked to a fear of abandonment, a fear of being misunderstood. I think a lot of the fears you were talking about earlier, Anna, is a fear of conflict, fear of belonging, which can also be connected to a fear of conflict impacting the connection or the relationship, which also goes back to our first conversation. So many of us HSPs would rather push our boundaries and prioritize others' needs before our own. And the problem is, if we do that consistently, then, um, and we would rather avoid any type of confrontation or conflict, therefore dimming or suppressing our sensitivity a little bit rather than risk the potential consequences. And those consequences can be real or they can be perceived. They can be learned from previous experience or they can be assumed. However, I think this is also a multi-layered issue. I don't want us to talk on terms that it's only HSPs because I think there's something about internalized gender norms, the constant reward and punishment that we may have received about either expressing or not our needs, our sensitivity, our boundaries
Yeah.
in the past and in different settings, our mental health and trauma history, and then there's so much more at play. So being highly sensitive people can simply make us extra aware
Mm-hmm.
and sensitive to all these layers and how they play out for
Yeah,
us and impact us and others. So I think that's an important thing just to mention.
definitely. And I really noticed when you said real or perceived, because the perceived ones
Yeah.
feel real too.
Yes, they do. And it's important to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
It is important when somebody is expressing something to understand that these fears exist for a reason.
Right.
And while we don't want them to happen again, perceived or real, they feel real, like you said, Anna, in the moment. There's a reason why they're here. So they still deserve the same care and the same exploration.
We are the collection of the experiences that we've had and how we've
Yeah.
like interpreted them and lived through them. And our understanding of the world is based on our experience of the world. And so it makes
Hmm.
sense. It couldn't be any other way to approach
Yeah.
our present based on what we've lived in the past.
Yeah. And also showing that we don't want to necessarily repeat the past shows also that resilience and that ability to differentiate between this is the past. I'm not saying the present and the future are going to be the same, but I don't want to erase what brought me all the way here either.
Mm-hmm.
So it's integration is a very important phase of healing is welcoming our experiences in the past as they've happened. That doesn't mean we like what happened. It just means like I know that happened
Mm-hmm.
and I can't pretend it hasn't and I can't pretend it's not impacting me in these and these and these ways. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, I know this is possible in the world.
Now, to go back to your
Yes.
question. um I know that sometimes people want the quick fix, easy solution. How do we set boundaries and how do we practice compassion and empathy in a way that's helpful and healthy?
Mm.
Um,
Tell us.
I don't have a quick fix. Yeah, like, tell us. I don't have a quick fix solution for you. You're asking the wrong person when you're asking a therapist. um, these skills take time and they take practice and they take a lot of awareness. A good place to start is something that we've said many times already in the podcast around being willing to take some time to sit with yourself and all these emotions that you have because emotions are information. And so when our boundaries are crossed, we may feel lack of respect, we may feel injustice, we may feel resentment. Let's sit with that because we learn from knowing how we feel. And if we brush that off and we continue, then we're basically dismissing and invalidating ourselves and our emotions. And if we've been around environments or people that have done a lot of that to ourselves, it's very easy to do that to ourselves. So practices like journaling, meditation, any embodied activity that can help you connect with your inner world and inner experiences can help you with knowing and understanding your emotions. So, emotional intelligence, self awareness is a big first step, a hard first step, but a big one to understanding who you are. And so, what do you need? What do you need? It's hard to set boundaries when you don't know what boundaries needs to be set. So, if you know what you need and what you want, then it's much easier to be able to communicate that.
Yeah.
I would say that's one.
I love that. Like if you know yourself, then you know what to share with other
Mhm.
people.
Then we have, as HSPs, that gift of empathy and compassion. So might as well start by using it on ourselves.
Mhm.
Am I right?
Right.
That is also a beautiful way to start. And it doesn't stop. That's a great thing as well is self-compassion is ongoing. There's always going to be places in our life that we won't feel proud of, we won't feel great about, and we'll need some self compassion so that we can keep moving. And there's always going to be people who are going to disappoint us, situations that are going to be disappointing. And so self compassion and self empathy is also important. And so that can also be practiced with using statements or reflecting statements that are without judgment, like you were explaining, Anna. So that can be also reflected in a journal practice, validating yourself. Talk to yourself like you would talk to a friend who is in distress. What would you say? Those are important skills to develop in your inner monologue.
Yeah. That's where I
Yeah.
find like the inner child stuff starts to get
Mm,
really
yes.
like I love this because I literally picture like I have photos of myself being little and I picture like little me inside my chest.
Oh, I love that.
And from that energy, because I think being around children, like we naturally want to take care. So I picture the same energy of like, I want to take care of that little, like little Anna who's like literally sitting inside my chest.
Yeah.
And I also, a lot of the time, like really love the person in front of me too. So I love you on the outside and I love like little me on the inside. And even without any tips or tricks, like just the energy, bringing that energy of like, I love you and I love the
Mm,
little me inside. What can we do to show both like the love that they
mm-hmm.
deserve? And then just approach situations like that.
Yeah. I really like that you brought back the reparenting yourself and inner child work
Yeah.
because it kind of all ties. I think this episode ties a lot of the things that we've said previously really
Yeah.
well. So thank you for that. And we're going to move back into a myth and truth scenario game for this episode on the topic of HSPs and relationships.
Yeah. Let's get started. So, we are going to myth bust today some common myths.
Yes,
So,
let's bust.
common myth number 1: HSPs are too emotionally fragile for romantic relationships.
Well, HSPs may experience emotions deeply, but that doesn't make them fragile. In fact, their sensitivity often allows them to be more empathetic and understanding of partners. So, no, not too emotionally fragile. That is incorrect and very wrong.
Hmm.
And HSPs are overly sensitive to criticism and conflict, making it challenging to resolve disagreements in relationships.
We're going to bust that because HSPs indeed may be more affected by criticism or conflict initially, but they also have strong emotional intelligence and a desire for harmony. With effective communication and understanding, they can navigate conflicts constructively. For you, Agathe, the next myth: HSPs are too needy or clingy in relationships, constantly requiring reassurance and validation.
We're going to bust that. HSPs may have a greater need for emotional connection and communication, but this doesn't mean they are clingy. Please do not use that word. They value authenticity and depth in their relationship. And Anna, please bust this last myth for us. HSPs are always shy, making it difficult for them to socialize and connect romantically.
The reality is that while some HSPs may be introverted, remember that neither sensitivity nor introversion determines social skills or ability to form meaningful connections. They can absolutely socialize and connect romantically. I said they. We, all of us.
Yay!
Time for our HSP minute. Agathe, let's start with you. How did you or will you nurture your sensitivity this week?
Okay, so I'll give you a quick story. Last weekend, I was in Las Vegas and Joshua Tree with my best friend for my birthday. And I remember being there and thinking about you, Anna, and being like, Las Vegas is not paradise for HSPs. Absolutely not. While Joshua Tree can very well be. It was a very nice, very peaceful, beautiful day in Joshua Tree, but Las Vegas, my goodness.
I knew that when you said you were going. It's like Joshua Tree is going to be amazing.
Yeah. I mean, the theme was when my friend asked me, "What do you want to do for your birthday this year?" I was like, this year I just want to be in the desert with nobody and nothing. I just want peace and quiet, and that's what happened. I was there on my birthday, so that was lovely. Um, but then the day after, or then a couple of days later, when we were in Vegas, it was raining, it was cold, there was a lot of wind, and there's so many people there. And at some point we stepped outside, and I stepped in a puddle of water by accident, and at that very moment I was like, that's it. My stimulation level had reached like breaking point. So my friend was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I need a minute." And I just went into a corner inside a hotel where there was the least amount of people possible. And I just stood there for a second, quiet. And she just waited there with me for a minute. And after, like, it didn't take that long. It took me like a minute, I think. But because I had a minute to just be quiet and she didn't ask any questions, she was like, okay, okay. And so I felt very seen
Mm.
and validated. The way I'm going to make it HSP minute is just to um, be thankful for the people that, since we're talking about relationships and we're talking about feeling misunderstood, just to be thankful for the people that I feel in my life are, even if they're not sensitive themselves, or highly sensitive themselves, I should say, because they are sensitive. They're not necessarily highly sensitive. For the people like you, Anna, for this friend, for my partner, for my family who, has had to um, grow up with me, and people who have been with me on this journey of understanding, cultivating, and it's not always easy, but allowing me to breathe and move within my sensitivity and not make me feel punished for it. So I just want to take a moment for that today
Mm.
or this week, maybe. That's my minute. It's a
Beautiful.
long minute.
Very much appreciated.
What about you, Anna?
Something that's been on my mind the past week has been the theme of shyness, which is not
Mm.
to be confused with sensitivity. I just sometimes also happen to be shy. And one of the ways that's manifested has been in dance. And I've been
Mm.
dancing a lot, and I've been getting some feedback from my teachers and coaches about like not doing the movements as big and like dramatic as they could be, and as I don't want to say they should be, but I just kind of play it small. Like I love to dance, and I also think sometimes I play it small, and I'm just going to tie that to my examples of like the dimming that we were talking about
Mm.
earlier
Mm.
on, and something I really would like to challenge myself with this week is to kind of like go for it more, to be more me, because I have it in me. I just kind of hold back sometimes. When we were talking about the fear of being judged, or
Yeah.
being fully ourselves or expressing ourselves, I'm making a parallel in my mind and really wanting to focus on expressing myself, whether that be through dance or in other ways, but practicing that this week.
Oh, I love that.
Hmm.
Thank you for sharing. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on this episode and for listening as always. Just a little disclaimer that we are discussing contents related to personal wellness. They do not constitute as advice. We acknowledge that each experience is different, and that if you're looking for specific support, then you may consider one-on-one professional help individualized to you.
Stay tuned for the next episode, which will be on career, professional life, and entrepreneurship in the life of an HSP.
Yay!
Bye.
Bye.